I feel like this is perfect. In my last video you could see like all the mess on my floor. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. Hopefully you can't see everything on my floor. Today I'm going to be doing a fall book recommendations. I am going to be doing a spooky book recommendations, but I want to keep this like fall theme, fall vibes, like books that I read in fall that I realized was like, hey, that's a really good fall book. So the first book I want to talk about is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This book is a book that I actually read in fall like 2 years ago, and it was just like, it just set the mood so perfectly. If you don't know what Vicious by V.E. Schwab is about, it's basically about these two crazy men who find out that if you kill yourself you can come back to life and have superpowers. I do want to say it is a trigger warning for suicide, because you do have to actually commit suicide in order to gain these powers. Commit suicide and they gain these powers, and then one ends up being really evil and one ends up being good. But it's actually how two best friends became enemies, and just the story of like morally gray characters and what is actually for the greater good. Then the next book I want to recommend is Wicked Deep. If you want to set the mood right now, like in September, I honestly suggest the Wicked Deep book. Is about an island, and on the island there's this legend that these three witches who were drowned take the body of a girl and that on that island every summer, and that girl ends up killing guys every summer. And so I personally enjoyed this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I will say I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it was very, very, very predictable, like really predictable. So I highly suggest this if you're just getting into booktube, if you're just starting to read a lot more, or if you want something simple that's not like too spooky but sets the mood right. I honestly suggest this. The lore in this book is actually really amazing. It is one of my favorite lores ever. Next book I have, and are we surprised, The Cruel Prince. I don't know why my camera always like gets dark, but if you know me, you know that The Cruel Prince is my favorite series of all time. I have 3 editions of this book: the regular edition, the Barnes & Noble Black edition, and then the Fairy Loot edition. I don't own 3 editions of any books. I'm not the kind of person. I only collect like special editions or a lot of editions of books that I really, really love. And The Cruel Prince is a book that I actually read in fall. I was gonna say last year. Was it? The fact that this year is so long, I can't differentiate this year and last year. No, it wasn't last year. Okay. But yeah, I read this. When I first read this, I read it in fall, and I read it so fast. I listened to the audiobook. I actually was gonna read this book for a summer. This is like either a good summer book or a good book to read like August and September, because it's like, you know, transitioning from summer to fall. And The Cruel Prince is basically about this girl who is kidnapped, her and her 2 sisters, and they're taken to the fairy world, and she grows up in this fairy world, and she grows up being basically picked on by these fairies because she's a human and the fairies don't like humans, and she is basically like infiltrating their world. And then she ends up being called to work for the king and to basically be like a kind of knight, but a lot of stuff goes down. For me, the book didn't really get good into the second half, which is why I highly suggest the audiobook. That's how I read the book. The next book I have, I'm actually really sad that I uploaded my all-time favorite video so soon, because this book definitely goes on my all-time favorites book, and that is From Blood and Ash. I just read this book in August, and I absolutely love this book. This book is basically a romance fantasy. It's really heavy on the romance, so if you want to get more to fantasy and you're a romance reader, I highly suggest this. Or if you are a fantasy reader but you want more romance, I also highly suggest this book. This book is so amazing. It is about this girl, and her name is Poppy, and she's basically a maiden, and there's only one maiden, and the maidens are meant to ascend, and when you ascend you basically get to live forever. And so she has to be like protected, and she has to have like a guard and stuff like that. And so she ends up, her world ends up being flipped upside down in this book, and it has player, the main guy, his name is Hawk, and he's basically like a player, and he ends up being her bodyguard. And it has vampires, it has werewolves. So if you're into paranormal books, I love when my paranormal books have vampires, werewolves, and all that, because I feel like it's more interesting. Like when I was watching Teen Wolf, I hated how they only had werewolves and like were-coyotes and all that stuff, because I'm like, so vampires could exist, like if you can turn to a werewolf, like vampires could exist, literally anything. It's also a big thing that I love the Vampire Diaries is the fact that they had vampires, werewolves, hybrids, witches. Like, I love when my paranormals have like all of it in one, because I feel like it just makes it a bit more realistic for me, because you can't have one without the other in my mind. But I really love this, and I haven't read the sequel yet, but I literally cannot wait. So the next book I have is another fairy book, and that is An Enchantment of Ravens. I love Margaret Rogerson. She literally has only gotten 5 stars from me. Like, I don't think she's got anything lower than that. She does only have 2 books out right now, but they're all standalones, and I really appreciate that, because I feel like nowadays books that are supposed to be meant to be duologies end up getting turned into trilogies and quartets. I almost called it a quadrology. But yeah, they end up getting set into like more than just one book. So having a fantasy book that's just one book really means a lot to me, because I don't feel like fantasies always need to be this huge series, and I feel like making it just one standalone is so much better. And all of her books kind of have the same atmosphere, so if you read An Enchantment of Ravens in fall and you end up liking it, I would suggest picking up Sorcery of Thorns in fall as well. But this one just gives me really fall feels, mainly because I read it in fall. And this book is basically about this girl who lives in the real, like, the real world, and she's a painter. And one day this fairy comes to her and he asks her to paint her, and she ends up painting emotion. Well, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the viewfinder. I'm just so beautiful, I can't help it, sorry. But she ends up painting emotion into his eyes, which is like terrible because they're not supposed to have emotion. So he whisks her away to the fairy world to be put on trial, and it's basically just like a journey, and it is kind of insta-lovey, but I don't mind. I think these characters work so well together, and I feel like the insta-love was written really well in this book. Like, this book is just so cute, and I hate insta-love, so coming from me, you should read this book. The next book I have is The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is one of my favorite classics. It's also one of the very few classics I've read. And The Picture of Dorian Gray, I feel like a lot of classics could be read in fall. To be honest, when I did my poll on Instagram, a lot of people were giving me classics, and I want to include them, but I don't ever want to include a book recommendation of a book I've never read before, so I couldn't include some of them. But The Picture of Dorian Gray. So The Picture of Dorian Gray is basically about this boy who sells his soul in order to have eternal youth, and his soul ends up going into this picture, and it's basically just aesthetics. Like, that's all this book is aesthetic. Like, there's not a pretty edition of this book I haven't seen. Everything about the book in general is aesthetics. Like, aesthetics, that's all the book is. The next book I have, you will be shocked if it wasn't on this list, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is the best book to read in the fall, I'm telling you guys. Like, dark academia is literally just fall aesthetic, and this is like the only dark academia I can recommend right now, because I still haven't read The Secret History. I know, how do I love dark academia so much and I haven't read The Secret History, guys? I don't know either. How am I supposed to be the girl who gives you guys black women in dark academia and I haven't read The Secret History yet? I don't know. Anyway, so Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo is literally my favorite Leigh Bardugo book. It's the only book by Leigh Bardugo I've ever given 5 stars. I love it so much. It's basically about this girl named Alex who can see grays, which are ghosts, and she ends up going to Yale. Yes, she goes to Yale. I almost said Harvard. She ends up going to Yale, which, fun fact, Leigh Bardugo has been to Yale, and she says that secret societies are real. So she goes to Yale, and she ends up working for the secret society to basically watch over them, and she works with Darlington, and it's basically just about that. And it also tells the story of like her growing up seeing grays, and also shows Darlington and him growing up and his parents wanting him to basically be something that he doesn't want to be. And it also follows this mystery that you don't follow. I will say this book has a trigger warning for everything. If I can find it, I remember seeing a website where it listed like books and their triggers, but I don't remember. And so I don't know, if I can't find that, I'll at least find the Tumblr post with the triggers. But I do want to say, with some of the triggers in this book, there are things that are actually mentioned and not shown, so I also want to say that. The next book I have on this list is a book that just came out, and this is still an ARC. I haven't bought the physical copy yet, and that is When No One Is Watching. I usually say that thrillers are better for like spooky, but this one is like, it's not really spooky, and I just feel like it's perfect for fall. This basically is about this black girl who lives in this neighborhood in New York, and it's about gentrification and turning that into like a thriller, which I thought was like such an amazing idea. And I really hope that Alicia Cole writes more thrillers in the future because this book was just amazing. Like, this was the only thriller I've ever given 5 out of 5 stars to, and I love the character. She speaks in like AAVE. It's just really refreshing reading a book, a thriller, where the girl speaks like you. And it's also about her teaming up with this guy, and like neither of them are trusting each other. Such a great idea, and it's very like Jordan Peele, which I really didn't want to compare Lalicon to Jordan Peele, but I feel like you just can't because this idea is just such a great idea. Last physical book I have, I do have more books guys, but the last physical book I have is Radio Silence, and I didn't read this book in the fall, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this will be a perfect book to read in the fall. This basically is about this girl, and she writes, I don't know why I'm always like, she writes fan fiction. I'm thinking about me when I was 14 writing Justin Bieber fan fiction. She draws for this YouTube podcast called University City, and one day she goes to this party and she ends up finding the guys, or the main guy, who is like behind it, and they end up becoming friends, and a lot of things happen, and it's just about friendship, and it's about anxiety and depression and mental health in general. And this is a really good book, and when I'm talking about it, you guys are probably like, oh, this book doesn't sound good, this book is gonna depress me. I am not lying guys, this book helped me through such an anxious time in my life. When I was on the plane, literally when I'm on planes, I'm always having to hold someone's hand, and I was listening to this audiobook, and it just was so helpful. And so I think that's why this book means a lot to me, and literally one of my favorite books, and it's so amazing. And even if it doesn't sound like something you would like, I still would say give it a try. Now we're on to graphic novels. So the first graphic novel I want to say is Heartstopper Volume 1, and this book is basically about, it's about the same author, Alice. Oh, hold on, Daniel's being too loud. Anyway, so Heartstopper Volume 1, this book is so cute. It's about these two boys who end up becoming friends, and for me, like, that's just so like fluffy, and I'm like, oh, that's so fluffy, that's so cute, I'm not into it. But that's all it is. It's fluffy and it's cute. And sometimes when you read a lot of fantasy, all you need is fluffy and cute. Read this. If you read a lot of fantasy, read this, because I know for me, reading fantasy is, I have to take a break every now and then, because it's just so, you have to put so much thought into it. There's so much world, there's characters with hard names, there's so much magic and this and that. But with romance, it's just there, so I always use romance as a palette cleaner. This book is just cute. The next graphic novel is literally because of my all-time favorite TV show, and it is Gravity Falls. If you've never seen Gravity Falls before, it's literally just this mind-blowing show that has like secret code, and everything means something, but everything means nothing at the same time. It's about these two twins named Dipper and Mabel, who end up moving to Gravity Falls with their uncle Grunkle Stan. He's their great uncle, so they call him Grunkle Stan, and his friend. And they end up moving to this new town and end up making their own friends, and they're only there for the summer, but it has very fall vibes. And one of my favorite things is they have this thing called Summerween, where they basically have Halloween and summer, because the whole series is supposed to take place in summer, kind of like Phineas and Ferb, but like on crack. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this show, when I was watching Gravity Falls, I was in high school. I was a high school freshman when I was watching this show, and I was like, how is this a kid's show? It doesn't have like cuss words or anything yet, but I'm like, kids watching this, I don't think they're gonna grasp it, because I wasn't even grasping some of the things that were going on. And when I tell you, to this day, I still rewatch Gravity Falls, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, for instance, at the end of every episode, there is a secret code, and if you go online and you look up like Gravity Falls secret codes, like, it'll tell you how to decode it, and it'll say something like random. And sometimes it'll be helpful for like the next episode. And there's also a website that I ended up finding, and I can't remember it, but literally it just had like a bunch of information on Gravity Falls. And when I tell you, Gravity Falls is only 2 seasons, and it has like this huge fan base, of course, that I am in. And every day I am more and more sad that it stopped at season 2. So I picked up this graphic novel, which it doesn't really follow things after the season, but it kind of does. Like, if you're thinking this is gonna pick up where it left off, it really didn't. It just kind of has like little adventures basically. And so the last graphic novel I have, but not the last book, because I just can't stop adding books onto this list, is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell. Rainbow Rowell is a very problematic author, so I will say if you don't want to support her, I completely understand. And typically I don't really read Rainbow Rowell, but I checked out this graphic novel. Like, it was a graphic novel with a black girl, a plus size black girl, and fall, and they work in this pumpkin patch, and basically what she's trying to do is she's trying to help him get the girl of his dreams, and it's just the cutest thing ever. And it's just, I just love it. Like, I don't know, like, they work in this pumpkin patch, and like they go to like other people's sides of the pumpkin patch. Like, I forget where they work because I haven't read in a while, but they work on one side. I think they work in, like, I don't know, but there's just so many things to this pumpkin patch. And they're only best friends every year for the pumpkin patch, but this year's their last year because they're seniors and they're going off to college the next year, so they're not going to be able to do it anymore. And she is helping him find the love of his life, and it's just so cute and it's so great. So now on to books that I don't own. So the first book I want to say is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I know this isn't out yet and it comes out in October, but this is like a good fall book to read. It's basically about this girl named Addie LaRue who makes a deal with the devil. He's really just called the darkness in the book, but she makes a deal with this devil to live forever. But the trick is everyone in her life forgets about her until she comes across this one guy who doesn't forget about her. For me personally, I didn't enjoy the book because I was told there was going to be a romance between Addie LaRue and the darkness, and it wasn't. But I feel like if you don't care about the romance, you're really going to enjoy this book, because I feel like this book has actually a lot of stronger aspects. Like, some things I really enjoyed about the book was seeing why she made that deal with the devil, and her family and friends forgetting about her, or even the scene where she meets the guy who doesn't forget about her and she's literally trying to steal from him. She steals from him, and then she comes up the next day and tries to resell the thing she stole to him, and he's like, "You were here yesterday." She was like, "What? I wasn't." And he's like, "Yeah, you were." And so it's just really interesting, and I think that if you don't care about the romance, you're going to eat this book up. Okay, so the next book I have on this list is The Raven Cycle, and this is like one of the best books to read in the fall, I think. Like, I read this book in the fall. Well, I was reading this book a lot during that year that I was reading it. So, reading it in the summer, fall, winter, but majority of it read in the fall. And I feel like this is like the perfect book to read in the fall. It's basically about this girl named Blue who is cursed, in which she finds out that she has this curse. This is about this girl named Blue, and she has this curse that her first kiss will die. Like, if she kisses them, they will die. And then she comes across these boys, and they because I don't remember the plot, and they end up just becoming friends, and they're trying to find a Welsh king. The plot is really hard for me to explain, because when I was reading the book, I really didn't understand it, if I'm being honest. But it was like a very aesthetically pleasing book. It has my favorite trope, which is one girl and a group of guys, and the friendships is like the best part of the book. If you are a character person, you are going to eat this book up. If you're a plot person. So on to the next book, and that is The Foxhole Court. And this book, I want to say, is also the best book to read in fall. Why? I don't know. I just feel like it's a really good book to read in the fall. It's basically about this boy, and he's homeless. He ends up being like scouted to play for this XC team, and XC is basically like a fictional sport that's made up. He ends up playing for this XC team, and then like they end up getting drama with like this Japanese mafia, and it's just like crazy, and it has like good friend groups, and the book has like a small cult following. The friendships are really good, the characters are really good, it's yay in every single word. Yeah, that's it for this recommendations video. I am also going to be doing a spooky recommendations video in October, and I'm already starting to read some of the books that I want to put on that recommendations for you guys, so stay out on the lookout for that. Thank you for watching. Comment some fall leads if you stay to the end. I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.